Good evening, YouTube. I hope this finds you well, happy, contented. Kevin Copernicus Rax from Cornwall in the UK. Still just about United Kingdom despite the Scottish referendum vote. It's Thursday evening. Particularly long day at work today. Well, it seemed a long day at work today. It was no longer than normal. I actually got away quite quickly and promptly today, but the journey home took a lot longer than normal because of roadworks and traffic issues. But there you go. I'm home now. Found myself with a few minutes of relative peace and quiet, and thought I'd share a moment with you. I'm smoking my Savinelli Quandale that many of you will have seen before, which is my ideal pipe, sitting still and doing very little. And in it I am enjoying some Mac Baren's HH Old Dark Fired, which I've never had before. It's new to me. Comes in neat little flakes. And it is quite delicious. It's quite fruity, quite full flavoured, and a glorious way to celebrate the evening. I've noticed that a few people who I consider to be regular contributors to the pipe community seem to have slipped off the radar for a few moments. Well, I hope that's just temporary, because there's people I've enjoyed watching in the past. People like the Modern Gent, who I know has got a young family and will have lots of other commitments. But he was rather prolific a little while ago and suddenly seems to have eased right back. But, tonight my target is reasonably simple. I think the last video I fell over my words more often than not, and the one before that was interrupted by smoke alarms, a cockerel, and my son cooking. He's out, so that isn't going to be a problem tonight. Cockerel seems to have gone to bed early, and the only extraneous noise would appear to be a sheep somewhere in one of the fields alongside us, complaining that it can't find its mates. Other than that, all is still. We've had a lovely spell of early autumn weather here in the UK. Well, in this part of the UK at least. Today started off really quite misty in places, and the drive to work was a bit slower because of it. I had to watch myself driving over the moors to make sure I wasn't ambushed by an errant sheep or cow or horse. but steered around those obstacles. And as the day wore on, the mist lifted, and we had the joy of blue skies with little white fluffy clouds scattered around. This evening, there's no wind, temperature's still good, and I say good. It doesn't compare to what many of you in the States report. I was watching Smoking Grandpa Bones earlier, and he was complaining about temperatures not getting above about 60, 61. Well, it's not a bad temperature for us even in the summer months. Well, there you go. I suppose we get used to what we live with, and it's quite nice now. It's cooled down a little bit. There aren't quite so many bugs in the air. There's less people complaining bitterly about the heat. Give it a week or three and they'll be complaining bitterly about the cold. But there you go. That's what people do. But I've got no reason to complain about anything, really. Got a bit of gurgle from this at the moment, but there you go. It'll ease off. There's obviously nothing too exciting happening in the UK. Our news feeds are dominated by the protests in Hong Kong, the fighting in the Ukraine, and there's been quite a big series of stories about the yoga tax in the US, which I find quite amusing. Not so much because the government's finding another way of taxing you, but probably more because what the Americans seem to do, we seem to follow a few years later, so I don't suppose it'll be very long before they're taxing us for being fit just as well as they want to try and tax us for being unfit. But hey, all this tells me that there isn't actually very much going on in the UK to worry about, because the stories are from elsewhere in the world. Here the predominant story seems to be the supermarkets in trouble. That is to say, the established names over here, the likes of Tesco's and Sainsbury's and Morrison's to a lesser extent, are struggling against the discount stores that we've got coming in from Europe, the likes of Aldi and Lidl, who provide perfectly good food with brand names that we've never heard of at rock bottom prices. As far as I can see, that's what a supermarket's supposed to do. Pile it high and sell it cheap, but our native stores don't seem to have cottoned down to that, and we've seen our big name stores significantly fall in value over the last few weeks as they report worse and worse figures. That might give a bit of solace to some of the small traders who've been fighting a losing battle for the last 30 years. And might even encourage some of my compatriots in the UK to try and shop locally rather than always go for the big stores. There's possibly a little bit more effort shopping at your local stores than there is going to a nice, easy to park supermarket. But I'm not convinced that you save any money by going to the supermarkets. There's always one or two things that sell cheaper than anybody else, but they'll get you somewhere. I noticed that Warren Buffett apparently has taken a bit of a hit with his purchase of Tesco shares some years ago. So I feel like I'm in good company because I bought Tesco shares in my pension fund a couple of years back, probably 3 years back now. And ever since I bought them, the share price has been steadily declining. So maybe I am responsible for the collapse in the share price. So if anybody out there has got a corporation they particularly dislike, let me know. I'll see if I can buy some shares and turn it around, send them south. Seriously? I wonder if those kind of deals do very much for the real people. I'm sure that some people are making money buying and selling shares, and I know that an awful lot of our economy depends upon the trade. How real it is? Well, it's another matter entirely, isn't it? There seems to be, well, I don't know if it's actually happening because my son's well out of school, but we're told that there's a push to try and educate our young people to be more financially aware and possibly financially astute. The only other news story I saw today that I smiled about was one of our big payday lenders, Wonga, has been forced to write off a substantial amount of bad debt because of unfair terms, conditions and contracts. And as far as I can tell, they seem to have written off about a third of the debt from thousands and thousands of people who've been suckered into the deals that they offer. So maybe slowly the regulators are turning around and expecting big business to actually be fair to the people. Wouldn't that be a first? I shall have to try and think of ways of varying my video making venues as well, because it's going to get quite stale, you watching me sitting here in the same old corner week after week. You might see if I can't take you out and about a little bit if I get any time during daylight hours, and show you the moor and the area around. It's rich in mining history, and there hasn't been any mining done for a long time in Cornwall. Well, that's not quite true. There's a reasonably active mine further down west, which is, I think, currently shut, but it's been shut, open, open, shut, shut, open over the last few years. But around here the predominant industry was tin mining, and that stopped a long time ago, and all you see now are the shells of engine houses and foundations of some of the buildings scattered about. I live in a house which combines a couple of old miners' cottages, because we had a fairly active mine here 300 years ago. As far as I can tell, these cottages were built for the miners, by the miners, and I know there's a couple of shafts scattered around us, one 50 or 60 metres to the east and another one 50 or 60 metres to the north of me. Long since disused. And of course we're built on granite here, so the chances of any movement is slim. We're built on granite, of granite. The walls of this cottage a couple of feet thick, and I work on the not unreasonable assumption that if it stood for 300 years, the chances are it's not going to fall down when I move there. But watch this space just in case. This is a fairly rural community, as I think I've probably said in the past. The main industry now is farming, tourism of course. But we're packed in quite tightly in the UK. I don't suppose we're bigger than many of the states in the US, and yet there's, what, somewhere between 60 and 70 million of us on this little island. I'll have to do some research into exactly what usable land area we've got, and how that compares with some of the states in the US. Here I am talking to an audience who I assumed to be largely American, with maybe a few English lads. But I know there's others. I know Backy Burt in Ireland. I know there's a few from Scandinavia and Europe that I see occasionally. But I think the bulk of the YouTube community is probably made up of citizens of the US of A. Certainly the bulk of the videos I watch are from American pipe smokers. And again, it was Smoking Grandpa Bones I was watching earlier today, and I realised from what he was saying that so many of your houses are timber clad in some way. Here the tradition is brick cladding, or solid brick, or stone, although many of the new houses are timber framed and then plastered or clad in brick of some sort. I suppose that means they can go up faster and cheaper, because we do have a huge demand for new homes, especially at the smaller end, for new people coming on board. And after the financial crisis, it's more and more difficult for young people to be able to afford to buy a home of their own, and here the rental market, which has been relatively small for many years, is growing fast. When I was growing up, home ownership was the only way to go, realistically, and when my wife and I got married, we didn't even consider renting. We scraped and we borrowed, and we managed to get a deposit together for our first home. And 3 homes later. I've still got a mortgage I'd like to get rid of, but we have somewhere, and frankly it's cheaper to live here with the mortgage than it would be to rent somewhere of equivalent size. And of course, if I was renting, there would be issues around my smoking, issues around the cats and the dog, and we probably wouldn't be able to fit chickens in either. So, completely different way of life. But I suppose as more and more of us are becoming city and suburb dwellers, and I suppose things like cats, dogs and chickens and pipe smokers are less acceptable in crowded spaces. Pay for that freedom. Where I live, realistically, it takes me 15 to 20 minutes to get to any of the local towns. There are a couple of small shops, probably a mile and a half, 2 miles away. But we're in such a hilly area that a mile and a half walk from here to the local post office stores will take me a good 45 minutes. Of course, we're talking about narrow lanes, often single track, and even when you get to the main road, there's no footpath, so you take your life in your hands to some extent. And when I say single track, I mean single track. The lane up to our house is narrow enough in places so that if you get a big vehicle coming up it, it almost touches both sides of the edge of the road. And there's even 1 or 2 areas towards the bottom of the hill where if I was to stop, I probably wouldn't be able to open both doors properly. The road doesn't go anywhere apart from to service the houses above me and the farm at the top of the hill. So we don't get a lot of through traffic, we just get the occasional walker and the locals. Hence the silence. Can you hear that? Yep, absolutely nothing. It's nice, isn't it? I suppose I'll come across as quite an antisocial old bugger. And I am a little set in my ways. But there you go. Anyway, I think I've probably rambled on for long enough. I look forward to seeing more videos from all those people that I subscribe to. And of course welcoming a few new people as they come on board. I hope you're all well. Good grief, I've rambled on for almost 24 minutes. Okay, so that's it. Time to go. Have a good evening. Stay happy.